So I've just introduced our great stars for tonight. One supporting and one the main act, Mr. Dan Winter and Jai from the School of Frequency. Hello, hit it.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm going to give you a little bit of a warm-up tonight. I hope you can hear me well. So my name is Jai Hein. I'm Dutch myself. A few weeks ago, I gave a lecture at the Metaalkathedraal. I'm very proud of how these guys do it over there. It's amazing work and an amazing place you're at right now. So my company is called the School of Frequency. Yes, I work with healing frequencies. Yes, with the plasma from Dan Winter. So we're going to talk a lot about, I think it's going to talk a lot about the plasma physics behind things. And I'm also a quantum osteopath. I'm writing a book on that right now, and my first training is upcoming next year in May. I'm going to do a screen share here. And just a sec. And I'm going to share with you some important terminology on what Dan is going to dive in tonight. So Dan can feel free to just use any words that he likes, because some things might sound complex, but if you know the wordings behind it, it becomes much easier. So everything you see here on the left, that is mostly the physics of how we can gain back some universal restoration. The self-healing principles, for instance. So if we have order, we know chaos as its opposite. And if we have an implosion, then the opposite is, in this case, I call an expansion. Now, all these principles here you find in nature, and Dan will definitely use some words like self-organization, the self-organization principles of your health, of how your body self-organizes itself with the cells to gain its health. Centripetal, so that something, a movement, whether it's a motion, it moves back to the center of things. The opposite of that is centrifugal. That means to move away from the center. On the below that, we see the word implosion. And so let me be correct here. It's about non-destructive implosion. Where also something goes into a retraction, meaning it goes to the inside of something, an implosive effect. All these principles I'm discussing here, this is what, for instance, happens in the Therify plasma that you also see in the picture on the left. These are two opposing plasma lights shining into each other, and you can lay in between, and your biology, your body, will go into this self-organizing mode. So there's a correct or non-destructive implosion happening, and below that we find fusion. So this device, the Therify plasma that I work with and that I'm guiding many people daily in, it knows cold fusion plasma. So fusion is how you bring two either opposing elements together. You will always have a middle, and fission is the opposite of that. It moves away. You can move to the sides, you're trying to pull it apart. Now here I put something that I would term myself like sound and light. They're like opposite, where sound is definitely much more magnetic than light. I believe myself, and I teach people that we are made out of the sound when we were in the womb of the mother. These were sound magnetic plasma fields that created everything. And we are electromagnetic beings. We are predominantly negatively charged beings. So anything that helps to bring your charge more to the negative pole, that is often considered more healthy than having a positive charge. Like if you have too much H plus in the body, H plus, too much hydrogen molecules in the body, it means the acidity level will go up. Dat betekent dat je dus gaat verzuren. So the negative pole of things is where we find our natural balance. Then one more word you will find also is compression. I forgot to put it here. A correct compression, Dan might use it, but it's the same motion that you will find in the centripetal, the implosive nature of things. And then the longitudinal wave versus a transversal wave. So one is coming from this angle, and this is the longitudinal angle. Now, this is the same, if you look into the frequency technologies we have on the planet, people use words like either torsional wave or scalar waves. This is also in the longitudinal wave spectrum, which is one of its own kind. Dan might explain a little bit later on that. But as I came here from the Therify plasma physics, there the last two words below, you will see phase conjugation. This is an important principle where it's very simple what you can visualize. Phase conjugation means two pine cones kissing noses. Dus die twee dennenappels die elkaars neus hier zo aanraken. Two vortexes spinning into each other, which means that in the middle, you have an implosive effect, you have a centripetal force, there's fusion happening, etc., etc. And of course, Dan has formulated his own formula on gravity and some life forces that have to do with the golden mean phi ratio. So I hope that this was a little speedy warm-up for you guys to get a grasp of what we're diving in, and I hope that this helps Dan to take the mic and take it further.
Thank you, Jai. You're a hero.
Thank you. No worries. Happy to help.
It's all there. It's so lovely to hear other people echoing the ideas, you know. It's wonderful. So we do use the word neg entropy.
Oh, yes, neg entropy.
Yes, and very similar to what Jai was explaining about self-organization. So essentially, entropy means moving toward disorder. So neg entropy moves toward self-organization or self-ordering. And that's what we say is a perfect vortex becomes self-ordering or negentropic. My book is called Origin of Negentropy. And yes, we believe that the plasma vortex in Therify.net generates that negentropy, that self-organization, because the pine cones are kissing noses. That implosion is happening. That is what this is all about. Jai is right on the money. Thank you for making simple pictures. So hi, everybody. As you know, my name is Dan Winter, fractalfield.com, Therify.net. And you know, I respect you. Most of you, English is not your first language, where we Americans, we're painfully monolingual. So I will try to go slowly. And I'm very happy to entertain questions. In fact, you know, questions will make it less boring, I'm sure. But I do have lots of pictures. So yes, when Maureen originally asked me to do a sharing, we talked about doing a sharing about healing water, about vorticity and healing and self-organization in water. And the beautiful thing here is that the healing self-organization of a vortex in water is precisely the principle of a healing vortex in plasma or charge. Remember that when we speak about plasma, essentially what we, you know, first of all, plasma is 99.999% of the universe, which is simply a cloud of charge. Now, normally, a cloud of charge requires heat to keep the charge in a cloud and not land and become mass directly. However, under certain circumstances, called negentropy, then a cloud of charge can exist without heat. Ooh, that's magic. And that's called cold atmospheric plasma, or CAP, which is one of the hottest subjects in all of today's medicine. Actually, if you research cold atmospheric plasma, CAP, in the current medical literature, you will be overwhelmed with the number of references to healing by cold atmospheric plasma. It's famous in conventional medicine. We claim, and by the way, our New Jersey Therify Center is about every other day on his Facebook page publishes a new article about cold atmospheric plasma and healing. It's amazing. That's Victor. But anyway, we believe, or we suggest, that the perfected way to have plasma circulate and to not require heat is precisely implosion, which is the subject of today's conversation. For example, and what I mean specifically, and it's one of the first pictures, is, when Victor Schauberger famously had his water vortex. By the way, the water was piezoelectrically doped, which means there was a little bit of rock powder, usually quartz or calcite, which is called piezoelectric. A little rock powder in that water vortex. And then he had that water vortex spinning. The most famous implosion scientist of all time, Victor Schauberger. And that water vortex would spontaneously get colder. Just at the moment, it would start to do magic stuff like make gravity, make energy, heal people. I mean, it was literally cool. Like, where did the heat go, man? Remember, heat is just a name for disorder. That's all it means. So obviously, if it was getting colder, it was getting ordered. Hello, ain't that magic? So what we want to know today is what made it get colder? Because, after it started getting colder, it started generating so much electricity that Hitler wrote Schauberger a check. Where did that electricity come from? Implosion. What made it implode? And you see, that question is identical with the question of what is implosion in a plasma vortex. Because essentially, what is imploding in the water is the free waves of charge propagating because of the fractal structure of hydrogen actually in the water. And I'll show you some equations and pictures, and there's lots of beautiful physics, but essentially hydrogen at the heart of water is profoundly fractal, and I wrote the new equation to prove that. So that fractality of hydrogen implodes the charge, which is literally this cloud of charge, which is a plasma vortex inhabiting the water vortex. Hello. And later in the same fun conversation, we're going to talk about Iris. Iris, are you there? Okay. Iris magically is teaching kids to see without their eyes. And that's how we got to be having fun with those guys over there, which is fabulous. And one of the things we found by measurement was that when kids could see without their eyes, they make a golden mean ratio cascade of implosion in their brainwaves. And guess what? So then Iris interviewed the kids who were learning to see without their eyes, and almost every one of them, we were there when she asked the question, said, oh, a vortex, a tube forms inside their head with their eyes closed, and then they can see through the vortex point. So what's happening in the head of blindfolded kids who can see without their eyes is a plasma vortex that makes an eyeball. Ain't that cool? So what that means is the same vortex physics, a plasma vortex or a water vortex. Remember, your head is 90% water anywho. So the same magic of the vortex could help you understand almost all of the mysteries. If we actually understood what made a water vortex or a plasma vortex, and it's really the same thing, if we actually understood what made that vortex implode and get centripetal, we would suddenly understand a huge number of spiritual mysteries. Anywho, and that is the first slide in the slideshow. I'm going to turn on my slideshow now. Is there somebody else with a mic on that's echoing a little bit, maybe? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm going to try this share screen. Let's hope this works. Okay. And now you're getting an infinite recursion because you're seeing yourself. And now are you seeing my screen, hopefully? It says, if you knew how plasma becomes mindful, then you would know. So here is what we were talking about before. We're talking about this vortex. This is, an image of Schauberger's vortex. Actually, I was with Jonathan and Dolly at Implosion Research Lab in Plymouth, UK, and the bottom flat impeller was spinning at 50,000 RPM, and that water vortex started imploding, getting colder, and then the aura around the vortex turned blue. And then if you put that vortex near some very dirty water, suddenly it would start to self-organize. So that's implosion. So we want to know what made that plasma vortex implode and become self-organizing or negentropic. So this is the review here, that if we knew how plasma vortex or a water vortex became mindful, intelligent, self-organizing, self-aware, then we could know what ghosts do after death, how tornadoes are steered, how plasma heals, Therify.net. The origin of angels, well, that's plasma physics too, but and where you can and cannot go in lucid dreaming. Why ball lightning usually responds to telepathy. You could know how your brain's plasma tornado sees without eyes and makes bliss. You could know how intent arises in black holes and wormholes. You could know the physics origins of concepts of God and heaven. Heaven is actually a name for that permissive fractal field. Hey Ave. You can know what orbs and elementals and nature spirits are made of. You could know how alchemy is isotope transition, literally implosive charge collapse, defines alchemy, alchem, access to the black hole. This becomes alchemy of the soul as spin-dense communion. And you could know also why implosion, fractal, or conjugate point is the center of gravity and of all mindfulness. So we call this fiery case infinite non-destructive charge collapse. There's lots of ways to describe this: infinite compression, perfect acceleration towards center, perfect damping, phase conjugation. These are all parallel terminologies. Hydrodynamic implosion. This is the origin of zero-point energy. It is the way charge accelerate could go through the speed of light, making gravity. It is how attention causes charge to collapse. It's the physics of audio tone induction, binaural beats for brainwave bliss. It is how we measure EKG and compassion. It is the physics of self-organization from chaos. It's the only actual artificial intelligence is the intelligence of plasma. It is the electrical definition and measurement of life force, and it is the pure geometric origin of alphabets. So this is the top-down view. As we said, the pine cone kissing noses, but you see that this perfect pine cone top-down view is literally all based on Golden ratio and happens to be the top-down view of DNA and every living protein. And I later proved by equation, you'll see that this is the top-down view of the center of hydrogen, center of water. And that's what it looks like. Maybe you've seen the pictures before. This is the perfect vortex. It's the form of the caduceus. It's 10 golden spirals on the perfect 60-degree light cone of implosion. And you'll later see that that's the physics of how we invented the imploder.com, the perfect vortex being used in 25 countries to heal water. So this is what we meant by pine cones kissing noses. This was made famous in the book Fields of Form, Vortex of Life by Lawrence Edwards in the biodynamic anthroposophic tradition. He started with the spiral structure of heart muscle, but showed, for example, that the change in angle of the seeds on the pine cone were adjusted over the season to control how much voltage the tree generates from gravity. So this is the actual geometry of the perfect pine cone. Notice it's all based on golden ratio. And yes, you see that the golden ratio is the only progression that allows you to both add recursively in infinite series, and in that same series, you can multiply any number by 1.618 to get the following number. So it both adds and multiplies. What was little known before we proved it by wave equations, that right there is the solution to what Einstein said was the problem he died with, which is infinite non-destructive compression. The solution to infinite non-destructive compression is right here in front of you. It is the definition of self-similarity and fractality, and the definition of recursive constructive wave interference, adding and multiplying perfect heterodyning. And therefore, it is the solution to infinite non-destructive compression and implosion and negentropy. And as Einstein said, if you knew the solution to non-destructive compression, you would have the unified field, the cause of gravity, and we do. What comes out the center of that pine cone is called a longitudinal wave, which we now know is what gravity waves are made of. And we might go there later. So this, I promise, this will be the last slide of the physics, okay? But just so you know, we have the physics. So these are our physics journal publications of my equations for A, the geometry of hydrogen based on golden ratio, to the left, golden ratio multiples times the Planck constant. Planck is the universal musical key signature of every wave in physics, Planck time and Planck length. And I discovered if you multiply that by whole number multiples of golden ratio, called perfected fractality or phase conjugation, you get all kinds of magic numbers like 3 radii of hydrogen and all the cool stuff that the ADP, ATP, Earth year, Venus year, we'll show you the slide. So, and on the right is the published paper where we showed by the Klein-Gordon generalized wave equations that that is in fact the cause of gravity and all negentropy. So I promise now I'm going to stop with the physics. So this is where I turned that equation for hydrogen into the perfected water vortex. So I just took that angle down the 60-degree pine cone angle. So remember, here's the pine cone angle. This is a 60-degree cone into an infinite nest of pent dodeca. And I took that equation for hydrogen and I used CAD-CAM to build the perfect vortex nozzle, which became here the imploder.com, our super imploder. And later you'll see there's a larger model called the ultra imploder, which actually is here. It's solid stainless, 1 inch, costs about $2,000, and it is can handle virtually infinite pressure. It's virtually indestructible, commercial related, and we can add order, solubility, hydration, healing, growth to water dramatically because the spin density enables hydration and therefore bioavailability. That's the imploder.com. So this is some work we did on what's called magnetic phase conjugation or magnetic implosion. I won't go into it. And here are the harmonics of a magnetic field that was FDA proven to eliminate pain by Elizabeth Rauscher on top, a friend at the time. And indeed, that this then actually is the magnetic field from the coil in Therify.net. So that's when we learned actually you could use this field to make plants grow. And this is what Steiner called etheric formative force, which we now know is a name for implosive capacitive coupling. Another name used by those who don't understand science is biogeometry. The actual physics is capacitive coupling. Actually, it appears that Steiner and Reich did not know what a capacitor is and therefore did not use the right words, but the concept of capacitive charge implosion is the key in both cases, Reich and Steiner. Then we talk about tachyon energy, which are waves that go faster than light. We'll talk about that later. But that's where we go into the longitudinal stuff. So this is the Therify.net, which Jai was kind enough to refer to. And yes, it's a double acoustic modulated bioactive luminous implosion in plasma. We take phase conjugation in noble gases in the Pyrex tubes, phase conjugate optics, and then we modulate with a 500,000 volt input in the RF frequency range, sub megahertz, and then we modulate that with a low frequency cascade, which is right here. These are the low frequencies, infrasound, we modulate, which is a perfect implosive cascade. And you see on the bottom here, these are the frequencies Antoine Priory used to heal thousands of cancers in France, documented by the French government. And then I realized, which he didn't, that the principle behind these frequencies Antoine Priory used is called phase conjugation tuned to Planck and perfected and got the complete harmonic series, which we now use. Antoine Priory sadly did not even know that he needed a pair of opposite tubes to phase conjugate because he didn't know what phase conjugation was. But that is still what, inspired the Therify. And it was well known at that time that Antoine Priory's plasma caused seeds to grow dramatically, as does Therify.net. So this is some of our work using the same technology, flameandmind.com, to measure life force in buildings and trees. Here we're showing the pyramid energy uses this phase conjugate cascade. We won't go into too much detail here, but the core point is here in the bottom, and I know the print is too small, but the top caduceus from Hermes is the actual frequencies of my equation, Planck times Golden ratio in blue, 2.75 up to 1909. In the bottom, in green, which you can't see, they're too small, I'm sorry, but is the actual known Schumann harmonics, 3 hertz, 7.83, 14.3, 20.8. So you see how close the Schumann Earth harmonic cascade in green at the bottom is to the calculation of what makes Gaia negentropic or self-organizing. It's an implosive harmonic cascade. Okay, I'm going to just pause this here. I'm going to just come back to here, and I want to check to see if, for example, there are questions at this point. Maybe a little dialogue. I don't want to do all monologue, for example, but you're getting the idea that the core point I'm making is if you knew the frequency harmonics that cause that vortex, whether it's a water vortex or a plasma vortex, if you knew how that vortex did implosive collapse, and what comes out the center is called a longitudinal wave, we'll get to that later, but that's literally the predictor of whether you can lucid dream. That's the reason Therify.net famously triggers lucid dreaming, which we know for sure predicts who is going to take memory through death. So you inhabit the array of that longitudinal field, sometimes called heaven or plains of Charon, when implosion is successful. So we must know how to implode that vortex. And later we're going to talk about how that happens in DNA. But I don't want to carry on too long without having some dialogue. Questions?
Thank you, Dan. Wow, that's amazing. I would like to ask you something. Since we see in nature all around us the geometry that you described, the implosion, I guess, by which like the seeds in a sunflower form themselves, or a nautilus shell, or everything in nature follows this code of life.
Exactly.
As do we in our bodies.
Exactly.
And I think the big invitation is to use nature as an inspiration to find that same balance in our energy fields. And since we are like how do you say that, like thinking and feeling beings, that's the biggest challenge, I think, for us to center ourselves, because
Yes.
the kids show us what we are capable of when we are coherent in our
Exactly.
energy fields.
Hmm.
And I feel they are still like more natural than we are, closer to the natural perfection of how we came on this earth.
Exactly. Yeah. And in fact, perfect centering is exactly what we're describing. And you're
Yeah.
right. Look to the kids. Exactly.
So it is, I do believe it is this stillness point, the
Mhm.
non-dualism,
Mhm.
where you are, where your vision is broad and you're not attached to your emotions. You can see clearly. Then the white and the black disappears. You
Yeah.
can see it, but you're not part of it anymore.
Well, it's an interesting thing because we are literally describing the only place where waves can agree, and
Yeah.
therefore the only place where stillness is possible,
Yeah.
which ultimately potentially becomes the center of bigger and bigger tornadoes,
Yeah.
which is your aura getting bigger. Exactly. And the psychology of that is exactly that when you get to that center of that vortex, bliss is, or Kundalini is like inhabiting a lightning bolt. You can only do it if you're not angry. I mean, if you sorted your emotion, I mean, if you found a shareable wave, that's exactly the point. And kids are more likely. True.
Yeah, and it's that with the kids as well. If they are tired or if they are angry,
Yeah.
it won't work.
No, exactly.
It's not there.
Yeah, and this is exactly the physics of how you prepare for bliss or death or birth, I suppose. But it is that what you've done effectively is sorted your day into essence or pure principle. Who were you mad at today? Well, blah, blah, blah. And then you sort and you get to the still point and you realize, oh, well, their intention was my intention, was their intention, was my intention. It's all done with mirrors. And then you forgive. And then suddenly you can get to the still point, the center. But if you're still mad at somebody, no stillness is possible.
Yeah, exactly.
And you see, the nature of the collective unconscious or heaven, the planes of Sharon that you inhabit when you lucid dream or die, is an electric field that only permits perfected charge distribution, which is quite literally pure intention. That's why successful death or bliss is a black hole, and you can only get in there if you are a shareable wave. And you're right, the kids, they would have the intuition. Right on.
Beautiful.
So the death is a black hole.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, the sequence, it's in the slideshow, but just briefly, that the Heinrich Clouvet famous form constants seen at the moment of death by thousands is well known. Lattice cobweb tunnel spiral. We actually know why you see those geometries during successful death, because successful death is a black hole. That's also why, which means perfected compression, means probably not, a hospital may not be the best place because the electrosmog, doesn't compress well. Whereas people who die in nature, often you see their ghosts rising up gently, but you don't see that in electrosmog. No, and in fact, Ray Moody, famous, he's great, proved that death visions are electrically contagious. The surgeons know, and it's a black hole. And also the medical surgeons who clinically died and came back and looked at their body from outside their body, we now know exactly what they did. They took that same plasma vortex that you take with you when you dream and when you die. And we also know when they were outside their body, looking at their body, and remember, this is medically documented by high-level surgeons. They're outside their body, looking at their body. We now know there are places you can go when you're a plasma donut, and there are places you cannot go. For example, you could never look at your body from outside your body from inside a steel box. No. Because the same thing that will kill a plasma vortex, therified plasma, which is lots of metal, kills the soul. Hello, messy. So that is a point of view.
Yeah, interesting, because we're all saying when you die, you go to the light. And
Well,
people also say you go, if you go to your heart, would that be saying you go to the black place?
Well,
you go inside?
effectively, The Aboriginals got it right. They call it Dreamline Songline Dreaming Track. Actually, it's a longitudinal array of Earth grid magnetic line cross points, the only place where telepathy and cathedrals and labyrinths and Therify work better too, actually. Telepathy is measured. So the magnetic grid is the blood of ancestral memory. And the term for that is longitudinal array, which is more accurate physics than the word heaven, plains of Sharon, or Champs-Élysées. But that's what it means. And so that array is inhabitable only under very specific limited circumstances. That array has been gathering survival library for 1 billion years, and you don't get in or out without a library card. And the library's behind Jai over there. But the library card is, are you compressible or are you shareable? Or have you distilled the memories of your life to survival pure principle? And so we get into the, I have a bunch of graphics about what a longitudinal array is. But basically, every time a magnetic wave propagates, there's a component which goes up and down called transverse, perpendicular to the direction of propagation. And then there's a smaller component of the electromagnetic wave, just like an ocean wave, which is traveling in compression parallel to the direction of propagation. Now, it takes more order for an electromagnetic wave to propagate longitudinally, sometimes called scalar. But if it is compressional or longitudinal, that means when compressional waves arrive at symmetry, they can make implosion. That was the name of the first nuclear device for that reason, actually. And it's the reason that the nuclear critical mass is dramatically reduced at the Earth grid magnetic cross points. They didn't tell you that, but Bruce Cathy measured it. So these compressional longitudinal waves, when they converge constructively, remember the transverse component, that's not going to make compression work. No, you only need the compressional, scalar, torsional, longitudinal component. And that compressional component of the wave, then every time it bounces at a wave node, the compression point, that vortex can exchange inertia between the heat-containing transverse component. It is therefore the only possible physics of action at a distance. Einstein called that spooky. He was wrong. We know exactly how action at a distance works. In fact, when the many Therify centers who do remote healing, we teach that as physics, not as a mystery. We know it works better at sunrise and sunset. It works better at solstice and equinox. It works better at a magnetic ley line cross. And the physics is because that is the conjugate point. For example, that is the physics of why Agnihotra makes your hair stand up precisely at sunset. And that's plasma just like Therify. So that's an introduction to the importance of what I call longitudinal interferometry. But I carried on a bit much here. Maybe more questions or conversation?
Yeah, and then we have a question from somebody here.
Thank you for your insight.
Louder?
Ik denk dat het sowieso herhaald moet worden.
Thank you for your insight. We gaan misschien weer herhalen, want jij zegt wel, ik ga even om. Zijn aanzien? Dit is een
Ja.
So, my question then, maybe a bit stepping down from the...
Can you come closer to the microphone?
Yeah. Or maybe come here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
closer to the microphone. I can hear you better if that's
like
okay.
hier zitten.
Yeah, the mic is there.
Yeah.
Good.
The mic? Where's the mic?
Nee, hier gewoon.
Oh, okay. So, hello, Dan.
Yes,
I have
yes.
a slightly simple question. How long does information stay in the water? Given that certain information is stored in the newly structured water, what is the longevity of the information before it gets corrupted by external factors like high frequency radio waves or maybe low frequency?
Yes, very appropriate question. Yes. Well, obviously, I'm sure that question is quite complicated. I can tell you we made some tests, however. So we took what at that time was the super imploder, and we showed that and we were like doubling germination rate and doubling seed growth rates by passing the water through a vortex and then the magnetic array, theimploder.com. And we showed that the effect would last at least 3 to 5 days in tank storage of that water. But we know, for example, that the presence of heat or pressure or shock will gradually reduce the spin density in the water, and we know why. Also, for example, water that touches metal will dissipate spin density a little more rapidly than if the water is touching an insulator. Also, we know in what's called the laminar condition that the thin film of water touching higher dielectric materials enables maintenance of charge. It's essentially water that touches, it's called epitaxial water, that touches a high dielectric will actually retain its spin, where water that's touching metal will gradually lose that spin. That doesn't mean that if you have metal pipes in your house, you're doomed, but it does mean that gradually these various conditions decrease what's called the molecular ordering of the water, the structure in the water. So high heat, temperature, shock, high pressure, and touching metal are various examples of that which gradually depletes the charge density in the water. One of the ways we measured the charge density in that water was the declustering. So when the water molecules are able to stand declustered, the water is more hydrating or bioavailable, identical with the way your blood has more immune health if it's declumped, called derouleau, when the blood cells are able to stand by themselves. And we've measured dramatically that is a beneficial effect of Therify.net many times.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, no, you go on. I'll take them.
So basically, physical contact with the container will affect it quite a lot. But then the question is, if you can store it for a couple of days, the information is then for, say, a copper flask something to consider, or something else, other materials?
Well, here's a clue. The magic vortex in the implosion lab in UK, a thin film of silver or gold is wonderful. It's a whole hierarchy, just like there's a hierarchy of stuff, what's good in your house, natural material versus, well, the same thing is there's a hierarchy of what water likes to touch.
So is it of use or not of use, the copper?
Copper is certainly better than most metals, for sure. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
I think Jai wanted to say something.
I'll do one next. You talked about the 3 radii of hydrogen.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? And how is this applicable to water and even consciousness?
Well, specifically, they're called the ionized hydrogen radii. Hydrogen has many radii, and it's in the literature that golden ratio is all over hydrogen structure. I was just the first to show that the ionized hydrogen radii, which are the primary radii, are exactly golden ratio multiples of Planck. I mean, to 6 significant digits. So this was shocking to physicists. It's literally a smoking gun. No one has ever explained the structure of hydrogen with pure geometry before. It's so cool. And it tells you how to make the perfect vortex, literally based on hydrogen. And remember, that vortex, starting with hydrogen, is stacked in that array from hydrogen to water structure, to macrostructure, to DNA structure, to Earth grid structure, to galaxy structure. They're all exactly golden ratio exponents of Planck. So that vortex, that phase conjugate cascade, is a equation that predicts negentropy in everything from the galactic year, precessional year, Earth year, Venus year, they all fit the equation, not just hydrogen. Hello, the Schumann harmonics, the brainwave harmonics, all exactly golden ratio Planck. That is cool.
Thank you, Dan. So basically, hydrogen is the smoking gun itself.
Exactly. No physicist can look at that exactly like 8 significant digits, golden ratio times Planck is hydrogen rate. No physicist can look at that and say it's a coincidence. No. So there's a smoking gun. And then we tell that physicist, this is how hydrogen, this is why hydrogen makes gravity. And that's when they fall off their chair. Because no one ever had a clue why objects fall to the ground until they looked.
Hello, Dan. I have a bit of a strange question. I wonder why you people call the Terrify Terrify because of the connotation.
It's if you pronounce it wrong, it sounds like terror by phi, but it's actually the original word was therapy by phi. Literally. And by the way, it was Paul's idea, but I kind of liked it. Therapy by phi. And in fact, when we even say the word fire, we literally mean phi's ray. And when we say the word infinite, we literally mean infinite, literally. And if you say phi, P-H-I correctly, phi, you literally start a phi spiral in the air pressure out of your mouth. So Therapy, I think, is a great name. And then the therapists have a good title also.
Yeah, so
Yeah. So what is the right pronunciation?
Well, therapy or therapy. I call it therapy, but some people call it therapy.
Therapy.
You
Thank
know,
you.
A lot of people disagree on how to pronounce phi, fi, fo, fum.
Well, I always say to clients after the plasma treatment, now you're 100% therified.
Thank you. It's all fun.
Well, no questions for now, so please continue.
Okay, so then, I'm going to show a few more pictures here, but we can, like I say, go back to dialogue mode at any time. We're just trying to get the details. For example, I could show you that chart, which actually shows the harmonics in that cascade at some length. Let me see if I even have that here. All right, so this is where we're talking about how that vortex kissing noses explains the difference between centripetal and centrifugal in the north versus south magnetic poles. Did you know that the magnetic south pole is more centripetal and will accelerate healing rate, but the magnetic north pole is more centrifugal and will decrease pain? And there's a dramatic difference. In magnetic polarities are literally the same principle.
Dan,
Yes.
how did you define the North Pole and the South Pole?
That is one of the most confusing questions on planet Earth. Did you know that the Chinese define magnetic south and north the opposite of most of the rest of the planet? I know, because we order $10,000 worth of magnets every few months from the Chinese. You know how they label their magnets? It's confusing as all hell. But what I can tell you for sure is if you get the correct magnetic south pole on your toothache, it will increase the pain and increase the pain and increase the rate of healing. If you take the north pole on the same toothache, it will reduce the pain, but reduce the rate of healing. That is the difference between centripetal and centrifugal. Now, it's true, it will be very confusing to get the north and south pole of your magnet labeled correctly, and don't ask the Chinese. But the point I'm making is, we could spend a lifetime. Did you know that Roger Green, my Feng Shui teacher I taught with for 30 years, he defines yin and yang, centripetal, centrifugal, the opposite of my other macrodynamics teacher. Anyway,
Is it like, could you also define it as a field you tune into?
well, magnetic north and magnetic south are opposites. What few people know is what's specifically opposite is relative centripetal versus centrifugal. And that is a key. If you research them using magnets for healing literature, you will see consistently one pole is centripetal, increases pain and healing rate because it moves toward negentropy. The other pole is centrifugal, decreases pain, but decreases healing rate because the centrifugal is less negentropic. Did I confuse the heck out of you there?
Yes, thank you.
But it-
I feel in my mind comes up like it's the difference between gold and silver. Is that correct?
Actually, no. The gold atom has a more complete SPDF array and would be a bit more fractal. But the difference is not between centripetal and centrifugal. It essentially means which has a greater amount of converging versus diverging flux lines. That is the point. And converging flux lines is the subject of everything we're talking about today. That's the key to implosion. So using magnetic polarity to understand the implosion is very appropriate. The website we have on this is goldenmean.info/magnetics, and you'll see all this explained in the discussion of the history of that polarity. Note just briefly, to show you the importance of that equation, Planck's times Golden ratio, on the right, yes?
So the idea was actually the force from the sun and the moon, no?
Oh,
Or
yeah,
the
no,
attraction. Oh.
Yeah, no, but there was a question from the audience. Can you name please again the website goldenmean.info/magnetics? Magnetics, is that it?
Slash magnetics, yes.
Yeah.
Actually, the sun and the moon metaphor are even more complicated. But just to say, the moon is hollow and metal, opposite to conjugate. So that's the physics of why if the moon gets between the sun and your plant, the plant will not germinate. I repeat, the physics of the reason the moon getting between the sun and your plant prevents germination, that's well known, is because the moon being hollow and metal is opposite to conjugating, meaning opposite to implosion, and therefore will prevent all forms of growth. All right, so now we're back to this. So what I'm showing here, just to give you an idea of the importance of that Planck and Golden ratio called origin of negentropy. On the right, you have photosynthesis. So here on the right are the frequencies or colors of light from 400 to 700 angstrom. And the two colors there that make photosynthesis are very narrow bandwidth. It's a very sharp notch of color that makes photosynthesis, purple and orange. And what actively prevents photosynthesis is green, which is why every plant is green, because that's the photon it spits out. The important point here is these two very narrow notches of what allows photosynthesis are the color wavelengths, which are exactly Golden ratio times Planck. So phase conjugate implosive fractal negentropy is the reason photosynthesis exists. So that's the reason every plant uses golden spiral, et cetera, et cetera. This is about Kundalini biophysics and steering plasma fields and DNA braiding to torus. So we're going to talk, these are what we're going to talk about in the next few pictures. Just briefly.
One question then.
Yes.
How is global dimming gonna affect life?
Yes, well, so global dimming is clearly atmospheric. It also relates to the total output of the sun, which is probably more responsible for planet temperature, average solar total output is more indicative of planet temperature than is carbon, for example. That's well known. And so global dimming will have an effect on growth. Some people think that global dimming may help offset global heating. And I don't think there's any agreement on that in the literature. A very complicated question, I'm sure.
Thank you.
I think this slide from Dirk Meyer, I think he's Dutch. But I just wanted to say that, simply put, the reason any vortex becomes implosive and self-aware and healing and negentropic, whether it's a plasma vortex or a water vortex, the reason it becomes self-aware is when it turns inside out recursively. I repeat, the reason any vortex becomes self-aware is when it learns to turn inside out recursively. For example, when you love someone. So that this is informing us. Now remember, the water is a nest of laminar layers of coherence. That's Schauberger's work. And when those laminar layers start turning inside out recursively, implosively, that's when the water becomes self-aware. Remember, water invented people because it wanted to move around. So this recursive turning inside out is the theme. And now we know newly that when the recursive turning inside out or implosion becomes golden ratio, that's when it can become massively negentropic. This is the idea about the plasma. So basically the perfect donut. And later we're going to see this is the origin of the Anu, 7 spins, 5 spins, geometry of human heart muscle and hydrogen, for example. So this creates this perfect nesting or embedding, and this is the idea of implosion. So this is more advanced here, so you can take that idea and generate the fine structure constant from recursive perfected turning inside out, goldenmean.info/predictions. By the way, people asked again that earlier, the conversation about magnetics is goldenmean.info/magnetics. So this is that perfected donut right there. It's got 5 spins inside, 7 spins outside, and this is called the Anu. The 5 spins are the pent-dodecasymmetry. The 7 spins are the 7 spin axes of tetracube. And this is what the clairvoyants saw at the heart of hydrogen, the heart of the human, there's the heart muscle, and at the heart of the sun. It all had the same shape. They drew the Anu, and now we know what they meant. They meant the 5 spins of the dodecacosa, surrounding the 7 spins of the tetracube. And that's what the Star Mother kit is. It's got the 7 spin tetracube inside and the 5 spin dodecacosa outside. Later, we'll learn that's literally how the electron shells make the atomic table. So this is more on golden ratio. This was that when you beat the water by golden ratio, and if the size of the adjacent dishes are golden ratio, and the beat rate of the adjacent
Dan,
dishes are golden ratio.
for some reason your sound went a bit dimmed.
Hear
Yeah.
the water?
Yeah, so it's okay.
That's a water vortex in Norway. Yeah. So this is an introduction to the physics of flow forms. This is the sevenfold. So in this this is actually inspiring perfect vortex in water. This is the sevenfold flow form. These dishes actually beat at golden ratio. That's the beat rate of the adjacent dishes. And the diameter of the dishes is golden ratio. And that's called a sevenfold. So this is behind the inspiration for what became the imploder, our water treatment. So I took that idea and built the perfect vortex nozzle based on this perfected symmetry. So, and then this becomes the physics of compassion, that if you look at where the plasma vortex comes from that causes your heart to fire, that when the heart voltage becomes implosive, you actually have the physics of empathy. It's literally recursive turning inside out perfected. And I then measured that in the EKG power spectra and am credited in the medical literature for inventing the mathematics of heart coherence, realheartcoherence.com, because I learned to spectrum analyze the heart to discover that it was turning inside out recursively. And later we proved commercially that this is a functional lie detector, realheartcoherence.com. It's literally the pure intention of implosion. And I don't have all the real heart coherence slides here, but we can dig those out. So this was how related to how Steiner then documented how insemination is actually the capacitance of the sperm here. When it hits the egg, if there's sufficient charge, the egg begins to dimple and then recursively turn inside out, called fertilization. And the stages of that invagination, the physics of the reason fertilization exists, is literally the 7 stages of that invagination. And if you look at the film clip here, you see that the torus donut turning inside out recursively, when it unpacks, will unpack into 7 smaller toroid donut vortex.
Whoa.
So this was the physics of fetal development and the definition of phyllotaxis, maximum exposure, minimum superposition. So this physics of constructive wave interference becomes not just the geometry of plant growth, but a proof of the physics of implosion. And this is well known in seashell structures, recursive turning inside out. So implosion exists because in the geometry of self-similarity it is possible for a wave to re-enter itself non-destructively. The ability to self-refer is the origin of consciousness and life. So this then predicts the crystallization geometry of water by implosive capacitance and gets into the Steiner literature on the physics of pine cones, which we mentioned. So this is called biolife is negative entropy. So life exists because of charge implosion. Seeds are fertile only to the extent that they're electrically implosive enough to suck in the first nutrient. That's life or death for a seed or a person. And investigating that geometry of the perfect egg then, there's an investigation in the Steiner literature. It's not just the physics of the heartbeat, but it's actually the polar geometry of the reason eggs are alive. It's a projection of a 2-dimensional golden mean spiral on a 3-dimensional path curve, the physics of the origin of pine cones. And also the reason why you can tell whether an egg is alive or dead by the voltage difference between the opposite ends. And the reason the voltage is different is the same reason for the pine cone, that the sharp end is more implosive than the dull end. So a sphere is almost always electrically dead, where an egg or a pine cone shape can be alive because of that voltage difference. And that's the origin of life, obviously, and the fractality. And so we took that and we developed a technology for measuring life force, flameinmind.com/life force. And here, for example, we're measuring the voltage difference between the top and bottom of a live chicken egg. And that voltage difference here measured, you can see in the graph. This is the low frequency electrical coherence of the fresh egg's ability to organize its weak electric field. This is the bliss of an egg. And so the ability to organize its weak electric field is life or death for a seed.
We got a question, Dan.
Oh, good. Well, here, I'm going to turn off the share. Yeah, see, I'm going to keep going unless there's questions, so look out.
Okay. Hi, Dan. I was just wondering because you know, all the models, how you say, is all the egg shape is like the perfect shape because you know, it's all
gaat
eggs.
het over.
It's all eggs.
Nee, daar.
Wat moet ik nou heen? Hierheen of daarheen?
Ik doe dit
Oké,
opnemen op jou.
oké.
I think
En naar
Alright.
rechter.
So the egg shape, so the form of the egg, it's the source of all life, and in all cultures and religions, it has always been the egg. That's the source of life. And are you familiar with the cosmic egg and then Martin Kenny, Pineal Foundation, that we're in the center of this egg?
yes,
It's a perfect torus, and that we are like the Midgard, the heart, the earth in the middle. You think
Yeah.
about
it's funny. Our bioarchitects.net, their favorite shape is always the egg. I would say
Yeah.
it's exactly exquisite. But what we learn actually is that the reason you can measure whether a cell is cancerous or healthy, that cancer cells are measured by their tendency to become spheres. And what happens is that there is no charge propagation. There's no plasma projection end to a sphere. And so actually spherical architecture like Bucky's geodesics are some of the most geopathic architecture on the planet. Really, our friend went crazy in one of those. Whereas egg-shaped architecture is the heart of most of the bioarchitects we work with favorite structure, including Michael Rice. That's all at bioarchitects.net and the egg. So yeah, cool.
Yeah, so you support the egg of life theory about this plane of existence that we're in, and that we are at the heart of it, and that it implodes in the center of the North Pole area. That's where the northern light, these are the electromagnetic, spins of our world.
Well,
Yeah.
I think that is probably a very useful metaphor. Even the concept Yggdrasil, the tree of life, starts with the word egg. But it's true that the asymmetry of the egg is key to life. And that voltage difference has to do with the sharpness of the point. It's literally the reason a spherical cell is almost by definition cancerous is because the membrane is not able to share charge. So the sphere, by definition, is charge isolating, which is about the best definition of cancer. Literally, contact does not inhibit replication.
Right. So you say we're on Gaia and everything is electrically charged, and it's the neg entropy. Then we cannot be on a ball because that wouldn't be self-sustaining, right? So it's an egg and we're in it.
Yeah, the sphere wouldn't work so good. Exactly.
So, yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan.
Well, there's more slides, but I think we should try to say, is there a storal to our Maury this evening? I mean, a moral to our story. Or let's even put this more accurately. How do we apply some of this practically? Well, maybe we should go there at this point in our daily lives. We have brought technologies, obviously, the imploder.com, flameinmind.com, therify.net. They're all based precisely on this physics of implosion. Exactly. For example, flameinmind.com, when we measure brain waves and look for that golden ratio cascade, we're literally measuring when the brain can implode. And that is the physics of bliss because it's the physics of charge attraction. You don't radiate charge until you first attract charge. That's why charge radiance of bliss always follows charge implosion. And we notice, in fact, we should mention this here since Iris is with us, that after Patrick measured many times, thanks to Iris, the children who were able to see without their eyes, and he's quite a student of these things, Patrick Botti, our programmer for flameinmind.com, good friend of Iris there, that the children who were able to see without their eyes, they were making a cascade of harmonics between alpha and gamma, actually. I can make about 5 golden ratio harmonics and have intense bliss experience, but I'm very lousy at making gamma, that 44 hertz up there. I don't get it. Maybe I'm too old. I don't know. But when they get the golden ratio cascade from alpha all the way to gamma, golden ratio in octaves, that correlates well with kids who see that little tube vortex form inside their head, blindfolded, and can see without their eyes. And Patrick is pretty helpful at measuring that. The reason I'm bringing up this point, we think this also identifies lucid dreamers, because in effect they're seeing without their eyes also. But actually, we know that that same cascade of harmonics, the same brainwave harmonics for bliss, is the infrasound driving Therify.net, which famously triggers lucid dreaming, which is the ability to spit out that longitudinal coherence, what the Egyptians called the Ba from the Ka, what Gurdjieff called the Kesjan body, what the Tibetans called the rainbow light body, what in myth was called the El, as in Elohim. You make that translation of vorticity from transverse to longitudinal, that's the El. So that longitudinal emission allows you to enter the array called the lucid dream or successful death. Point being here, then Patrick measured our new friend, quite very famous, Jean-Charles Moyen, very famous French secret space program survivor, who had multiple times, I mean, quite a few times, many times, his lucid dreams became so coherent that he would return from the beach in the lucid dream with sand between the toes and a water bottle from the beach, and there were many witnesses. So he definitely had his lucid dream became a portal by location. You can, and we measured his brain waves too. And you can see all the documentation, the major feature film, and the measurements all at flameinmind.com/lucidbrain. Point being that when Patrick measured Jean-Charles Moyen's, and there's a famous feature-length grade A Hollywood film out about this now, Jean-Charles Moyen, when Patrick measured his brainwaves, he said, oh, that's the same as Iris's kids, except for one thing. The frequencies were the same, alpha and octave cascade, a ladder from alpha, around 8 hertz, to gamma, around 40 hertz. So they had the same frequency cascade, but Jean-Charles Moyen's brainwave coherence harmonics were like about 8 times more coherent. In other words, the amplitude of those brainwave peaks was off the charts. He had to turn down the gain. So they were making the same, he was making the same frequencies as Iris's kids, except really strong. I mean, like, and so literally what's happening is Jean-Charles learned to turn inside out. And you know what? And you know what the proof of that was? That he even describes just before it happened. So there he's in his room and he has this intense yearning, and then he has this skill. He has a strong brainwave implosion. He turns inside out, and he's on the beach where he's yearning to be, and comes back with sand between. This happens multiple times by location. But
Dan?
Yeah.
When Jean-Jacques is at the beach, does he have a heartbeat to where he left his body, or is he looked like that, or is he alive?
You know, it seems like he literally bilocated and took his body with him. Actually, that's the reason the ETs abducted him. He had a talent. We're just explaining the physics. And the physics here is what a portal is. And what a portal is broad spectral phase conjugation. That's why the movie Stargate uses the Ophanum Angel letters or a hypercube for plasma implosion. So, you know, when you said, darling, I love you so much, I would turn myself inside out for you. What happens is at the moment of implosion, the body's inertia propagates in a longitudinal array, literally a portal. Now, in conventional physics, that's called entanglement, enabling quantum wormholes. But now we know that entanglement in conventional physics is a name for what is perfected in phase conjugation. The point is that how that information, that body got from here to there was in that longitudinal array of nodes. It's literally, it is the physics of all action at a distance. Now that might sound way too esoteric for you, but I would remind you that almost every single spiritual tradition and spiritual story on planet Earth starts with knowing the physics of action at a distance. Once you learn what the cause of action at a distance, almost every single spiritual story on this planet becomes electrical engineering. And that's why we're here, because that's empowering.
Then, for the children, the blind vision is very easy. And I think their brains are more balanced than ours. And I think our left brain has become way too overactive in our life.
Hey,
And
right on, Iris, right on.
a big, what Jean-Charles said, that he had this strong emotion of
Yearning.
Yeah. And I think that that's the magic that children have when they are playing. When children are in a coherent state, when they are when the left and the right is in balance. When children play, they create this reality. And I feel the emotions that they can sincerely live, make manifest. I think that's the magic where we may return back into as adults. To remember what it was, the magic that we performed when we were young.
That is so beautiful and so correct, Iris. But I wanted to say, proving what you just said, two things. One is the first few times I think that happened to Jean-Charles Moyen when he bilocated, it's because he was young and visiting his girlfriend. And the second thing I wanted to point out was that he reported multiple times that as he experienced this intense implosion experience, just before he bilocated, he was very consciously aware that in one eye, he was seeing where he was, and in the other eye, at the same moment, he was seeing where he was going, and he was aware of that. What does that tell you about the implosion vortex in the brain? I think that's gorgeous.
Yeah.
So, it is also training your consciousness.
Exactly. Inhabit the wormhole, kids. All right, that was the happily ever after.
So training your conscious means that you are also, well, to use the term, inside out, aware of what's happening behind you, in front of you, under you. Yeah,
Inside
exactly.
out.
So that's something we could train more effectively, no?
Yeah, maybe you could have them visualize the inside out bit. And there's a whole section in the slideshow about the physics of the origin of alphabets based on that. But yeah.
Then you met Raymond also. We had a Zoom meeting a few weeks ago. The guy from New Zealand.
Yes.
He has sent. I had a Skype with him and Patrick, and he sent us a video of a girl that does instant calculation and instant translations. So she uses the Bronnikov method, the Russian
Bronnikov.
method.
Yeah, Bronnikov. Yeah.
With the inner screen. And he guides her. He just says to her, now multiply 321 by 231. And he says, ask your screen. So she closes her eyes and then she tells the outcome of this equation or this. And she does translations from English to Polish to Japanese to Sinhalese, and she does it instantly. So Raymond said she's in New York. Do you think maybe Dan and Patrick will be interested to also measure her brainwaves to see what's happening when we do magic like this?
Jai, you just bilocated. You disappeared in. No, I'm sorry. No. I think that's gorgeous, Iris. What a great idea. You know what we did with Jean-Charles Moyen actually is we persuaded him to set up Flame in Mind and Muse and start making some measurements, and we could work with those young people or your friend Raymond and help them get started making measurements and coach them and even make a Zoom with them. So we'd love to. What a wonderful idea. And yes, exactly the point that the inner screen is demonstrating the capability of the intuition, the holistic holographic mind, which we now know a lot more about that physics. For example, we predict that that child would do better at a magnetic line cross in a sacred space, at sunrise or sunset, or at solstice. The four directions, everything that makes phase conjugation work is what makes compression work, is what makes intuition work. The same reason that Korotkov proved that intuition, military quality telepathy was enabled at magnetic line crosses for exactly the reason that we know how to help the young people. Basically, they need to inhabit sacred space.
And so what is he doing then? How do you activate the screen? Have you got an idea?
Well, I mean, just practically what we know by measurement is when the Kozyrev mirrors were installed, which, you know, they're microwave, which we know the microwave is ATP, which is the physics of Kundalini. So that enabled commercial, actually military grade telepathy, and they could not begin, and they placed this tube, which is just microwave coherent, until they measured the nanotesla density, the magnetic line cross, and they proved that's where telepathy was enabled. That is the collective, the bloodstream of the collective unconscious, which means these young people will do better if they inhabit reasonably sacred space. And these young people who inhabit just electrosmog and metal buildings, their skills are going to decay. That's a prediction.
Yeah, that's an important one.
Yes. In other words, move to nature. You know, where did the Jedi go? Deep into nature.
Mhm.
I think we should see if we can sort of come to an end, which will mean that there will be another beginning.
As long as we have a happily ever after well defined.
The black hole, I say.
Well, you know, we just did this film. It was released today, thousands of views already, with Sasha Stone on Contact, E.T. And it was basically, you know, tens of thousands of humanoid civilizations in this galactic quadrant alone. And the primary connecting force was trade. And what was of value for humans of Earth? Well, our technology is crap. The Stone Age is really. However, DNA is the highest value in the galaxy, probably for Earth DNA. Do you get why? Kids who can lucid dream, Iris's kids, that makes DNA that's more valuable than anything in the galaxy. What does that tell you? That's a happily ever after.
All right. Is anyone still want to ask a question before we go into our airship?
Yeah, it's really the physics of what is a soul, that longitudinal coherence, which comes from DNA braiding implosively, the real physics of bliss.
I have a question for you, Dan.
Hi, Dan. My name is Stefan.
Hi.
My name is Stefan.
Yes.
I was wondering if there is any relation between the organ accumulator of Wilhelm Reich and the thing that Dasha at this school of frequency is using.
Jai.
Jai.
Well, our view is that unfortunately, Wilhelm Reich did not know what a capacitor was, much less an implosive capacitor. Actually, orgone is generally a name for implosive capacitance, alternating layers of high and low dielectric, and if that layering is concave or convex, and ideally concave in implosive symmetry, then that capacitance can implode, and that will dramatically affect seed germination. Sometimes that's also called biogeometry, a word also invented by a person who does not know what a capacitor is. Now, Steiner called it etheric formative force. He also did not know what a capacitor is. I'm not suggesting these people were not wonderful. I'm just saying until we have a unified language, we can't make this shareable and we can't do it with precision. And we can't teach universities and governments what a soul is. So we need a disciplined language here. Yes, implosive capacitance is wonderful and super powerful. One example is the Ark of the Covenant, the gold and the high dielectric acacia. That implosive capacitance was used to non-destructively contain radioactive material, which is highly instructive.
Yeah. There has been the question that we will share the audio and the video. We will. So
Yes.
um,
Yes,
just
that's
to
great.
let
And
everybody know. Yeah.
yes, and hopefully you're going to share that video there, and then you'll send it. And I will also share it on our YouTube. We'd love to. Thank you. Blessings. We're a shareable wave.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's make it common ground, and let's forget about our governments and whatever they call themselves. All right. I say we wrap it up. Gratitude to this enormous, enthusiastic, in-depth knowledge and sharing. I've been running marathons and I still haven't gone to a finish. I think that's for everybody. Yes. Anything else to say? No.
A big thank you.
Thank
Deep
you.
Gratitude.
Thank you really for Maureen and Iris and all and Jai putting this together. Let's make this shareable and maybe we do this again. This was fun. Blessings.
Yeah.
Let's tell the kids.
Yeah.
Let's make them conquer the world.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you guys.
very much.
And
Thank
Plasma,
Jai, for your pleasure.
Metal Cathedral, you guys should all come and try it yourself.
Yeah.
Sorry, say it again.
Visit Jai. You can visit Jai.
Yeah, or the Metal Cathedral when they have their own plasma, but that's where you're where we talked all about this juicy stuff. You can put it into practice and experience. I think it's gonna be very lovely.
Yeah,
Good.
very good point.
on the way.
Jai. So we've bought the Terrify
It-
from
it's a-
Dan,
and they just confirmed a week or two it's ready, and so it's happening. All good. Thank you, Maureen.
and then we love to collaborate with everybody to discover plasma and how it likes to heal you and make you the best version of yourself. And we will have mutual meetings and communications with Jai and with Dan Winter, and of course with Patrick, a very lovely colleague and great friend of Iris and Dan and Jai. So we will keep going, and yeah.
Yeah, so
And
maybe it's good to say that Jai, you are in Amsterdam, and people can find you by going to your websites. It's Plasma Fusion or schoolofrequency.nl.
Yes. And I think the plasma will be very happy in your sacred space, Maureen and Iris. All fabulous. Thank you.
We'll be so honored. So honored. Yes. we're looking
Blessings.
forward to it.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you very
everybody.
much.
Okay. Bye-bye. We had fun. See you again. Bye-bye. Bye.